quite a risky area. There's earthquakes, natural hazards, that sort of thing. We're trying to sort of limit the amount of new exposure we take on. So we want to look after the customers that have had contents or had policies with us in the past, and sort of unfortunately that does leave a gap with the people who haven't.
After approaching IAG again for clarification, they say in the wake of the damage done by the Kaikoura earthquake, Wellington remains a high-risk area, and they are taking a conservative approach. They say some applications for contents cover are still being approved. This latest policy has been in place since Monday last week, but Ruby Rowe says she's been unable to get insurance since moving into a second-floor apartment in central Wellington almost a year ago.
I called up State first. They said that they aren't insuring the particular type of property at the moment, and sort of when pressed on that, I said, is that because of the earthquake, the Kaikoura earthquake? And they denied that, but they said that they weren't insuring this particular type of property without really elaborating any further. So that was quite frustrating, but I thought, oh well, I'll ring around.
Ruby Rowe then tried AA with no luck, and then AMI, which insured the previous tenant, but again could not get insurance. Her flatmate is covered through a private broker, but Ruby says that's simply not affordable for her. She says the whole experience has been a nightmare, especially as she has been previously insured by State.
When I was living in Dunedin, all of my premiums went down because I didn't make any claims. And I've paid a lot of money to them over the years. And then I come up here and it's like that loyalty is just completely one-sided. They aren't prepared to reinsure me, and it's, just incredibly frustrating.
RNZ also called AA, which is not under IAG, but were able to get a quote for coverage. Renters United's Robert Whittaker says many people won't have even considered insurance coverage before signing a lease.
The situation in Wellington is so bad at the moment trying to find a place. I doubt that thinking about whether or not somewhere may get insurance is probably quite far down a renter's sort of priority list in terms of when they're choosing a place. They might not even think of that until they've finally got a place signed up and stuff.
Meaning for renters in Wellington, they'll have the stress of not just finding a place to put their belongings, but making sure they are covered in case something goes wrong. For Morning Report, Charlie Drever.
And we had hoped to talk to IAG, but they weren't willing to be interviewed. We'd wanted to ask why they couldn't at least offer tenants insurance against fire, theft or damage and exclude damage caused by earthquakes. They say they're going to look into it and they'll respond as soon as they can. They also say they'll make sure staff are giving customers correct information. 7:27.
The Green Party co-leader Marama Davidson wants a capital gains tax to be just the start of wide-ranging tax reform. Speaking at the party's summer policy conference yesterday, Marama Davidson told members that resistance to a tax on capital gains is coming from a wealthy elite who are holding the country's political system hostage. She joins me now in the Auckland studio. Tēnā koe, good morning.
Ata Māori e kai on.
So the capital gains tax as proposed by the tax working group, you are supporting that in its entirety, are you?
What I want to see is the burden removed from low-income households and the redistribution of wealth, because what is happening at the moment, I said yesterday, 2 men own more than 30% of our poorest households and people in adult population in this country. That's wrong.
Is that useful, though, as a metric? I mean, if you were to
what
walk...
is useful
well,
then?
If you were to walk into a university of 10,000 students, all of whom had debts, then Marama Davidson, homeowner and politician, would have more net wealth than 10,000 people. So I could write a headline saying Green MP has more wealth than 10,000 people. I mean,
that's why the Greens
it's dramatic, but is it useful?
And that's why the Greens would want to see a tax on people like myself to make sure that we can put it back into public housing, public hospitals, public schools. And so I include myself on a salary, we said a couple of elections ago, salaries above $150,000 on a 40% tax rate, for example.
And but that's not being proposed at all here, is it? We're not, in fact, Labor ruled out a rise to the top tax rate for the tax working group's deliberations.
Yeah, and so I want people to be really clear where the Greens stand on issues, and that we want to remove the burden of low-income households who are struggling to just live ordinary lives, pay the rent, put the healthy kai on the table and pay the expensive winter power bill.
How does the capital gains tax proposal do that?
And so being able to feed back into a public housing program, for example, is how we can take the burden off high rising costs of rents.
But how does the capital gains tax proposal do that?
So it's about getting that tax in and funneling back into public services that will take that burden off squeezed housing.
It's a revenue neutral proposal.
And so it's how we can make sure, it's actually also how we can stop an unregulated housing market from high house costs and rents.
The thing is, though, you're not going to get more tax revenue if it's a revenue neutral proposal, are you?
Yeah, sure. So that's why we said it's the start. It's the start of regulating the housing market that has caused a burden on low-income households. An unregulated housing market has absolutely created a burden on high rents and high housing costs.
It's not an unregulated housing market, though, is it?
Oh, it's pretty crap, actually, when you've got someone who can own hundreds of homes, or even 10 homes, while we've got a man who sits outside Parliament every night for the past couple of weeks sleeping on the streets. But hang on,
because the details are important here, because your rhetoric, to actually make any meaningful difference to people, it has to be able to be implemented. What are you saying? Are you saying that you would want to limit the number of homes that people own, for example?
Well, it's just not right that we can have speculators who can own hundreds of homes, but even 20 homes, 10 homes, while we've got people struggling to pay the rent for a home, while we've got people living in cars, my local park in Manurewa in cars, while we've got people living on the streets. And so that has to be rebalanced. And that's what the Greens stand for proudly, that we want to rebalance and take that burden
how do you do that?
So that's why I said it's a start to regulate the housing market with capital gains tax.
Okay.
It's also why a tax rate on wealthy households is really important. But overall, Guyon, if I can just say overall, it's about rebalancing an unsustainable gap between people who are struggling and people who are not.
So if you're so concerned about that, why did you sign up to and indeed even originate budget responsibility rules that specifically cap how much governments can spend? And that means capping how much it can spend on the people that you're so worried about.
I mean, that's why I'm glad our party are reviewing that position right now, and our party will have a look at whether, having surpluses is at all appropriate. I don't think it's appropriate, Guy, and I'll be really, really clear. I don't think it's appropriate to have surpluses while we have floodings happening in countries when we've got floods happening, when we've got homelessness. I don't think it's appropriate that we're holding on to surpluses in that way.
So you're saying this morning that you don't agree with the budget responsibility rules?
So I was very clear in my co-leader campaign. Yeah. And,
What is your position then?
My position is that I need to ensure that the process of review with our party takes the lead, the members take the lead, and I don't agree with
stand up
surpluses.
and rail against the top 1% and talk about all the problems that we've got. How can that be even remotely credible when you're signing up to budget responsibility rules?
Which is why I've been very clear that I don't think surpluses are appropriate. But I also need to let the membership lead that review process. My personal opinion, Guyon, which is not secret, is that I don't think those surpluses and arbitrary debt targets of GDP are appropriate when we have got crises right now.
Okay, just finally, what is the negotiation process with Labour? Are you in a negotiation over the capital gains tax, or have you just said, look, go for it?
Everything is a negotiation, every little thing, every big thing, and clearly part of negotiation is putting up our public opinion and our public values on where we stand, which I did yesterday.
Thanks very much for your time.
Thank
appreciate you coming into the studio as well. Marama Davidson there, who is the co-leader, of course, of the Green Party. It's coming up to 25 minutes to 8 now.
And coming up before 8 on Morning Reports, the National Party